Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by BadgerBlitz.com publisher and editor-in-chief John McNamara. Great to see you as always, buddy.
It's good to see you too, Matt.
So a lot transpired over the weekend, John. A lot of big news coming out of Madison. A lot of big things happened in Madison over the weekend. Most notably, Muskego continued their big run to make it all the way to the title game. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Obviously, though, John, it's Monday morning. The big news dropped yesterday. Offensive coordinator Phil Longo has been let go by the program after another tough performance against Oregon in the offensive, on the offensive side of the ball, John. It's not surprising given the production on the field, but as recently as last week, we talked about on this very program, probably wouldn't happen till the end of the season. What changed?
That's the $1 million question, I think. Like you said, Matt, this was anticipated, and I would even say has been in the works for a while, right? But I really thought that this would happen after the last regular season game, specifically because you get that signing day that's early this year, so it allows you to sign kids and then maybe make the move after they sign and then kind of have those conversations after they do that. But, something changed in that timeline where Luke Fickell, or maybe with some pressure atop, made that move a little bit earlier. I think there are some advantages to doing that. And, there's a lot that goes into this move, but, specifically when you talk about quarterback recruiting, you have a guy like Carter Smith who's on campus this weekend. And again, this move was not made because of Carter Smith, but one thing that came up in his recruitment in the two schools that are really heavily involved, Wisconsin and Florida State has made their decision and they're moving on, and they have more clear answers now for Carter Smith and his camp as it relates to the future of the offense and who's going to be ahead of that. Wisconsin didn't have those answers, because when they offered and when they came down to see him, Phil Longo was still the coordinator. And up until Sunday, he was still the coordinator too. So I think that, again, I want to stress that this is not a Carter Smith type thing, but it helps you in the direction of the program by being able to say, we've made this decision, this is how we're moving forward. So that's a big piece that you can now bring to the table as you approach Carter Smith and everyone else who you're recruiting now in really 2025 and in 26 and 27. So you have some more answers there, and this has allowed you to move forward, I think.
I have a theory, John. The state of Wisconsin mandates that jobs for UW employees be posted for 2 weeks. That has come to bite Wisconsin in the butt before, because every other Power 4 school, I think, pretty much operates on they can fire and hire in like a day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Yesterday was 2 weeks before Black Monday, basically, right? Where everyone gets let go. This allows Wisconsin to be in a position to get, hopefully, in their case, their candidate of choice right when the market opens, if you will. And if they had waited until the end of the season, they would have had to then post that job, wait 2 more weeks to hire someone. You can have a verbal agreement all you want with a coach in those 2 weeks or whatever. They can say, hey, that's the guy. We know how this works. But at the same time, that doesn't mean someone else can't come in and Godfather offer them in that time and get them to sign before that 2 week period. And I think we've seen that happen with other potential coaches who I know have been looked at for other coordinator jobs, etc. This is why, in my opinion, they fired Chris so early in the season. I think McIntosh is really trying to overcome that obstacle that Wisconsin has in terms of the hiring cycle. So that's my 2 cents, and that's where I think that was the impetus. Once they really knew that this wasn't the direction the program was going to go in, they had to do this now in order to get the right guy next.
I think that's a great point. And, covering a lot of coaching searches and, from head coaches all the way down to assistant coaches, that's that time window, that time frame that Wisconsin requires. And I'm certainly not a lawyer. And I don't dive into, that type of paperwork, but that seems to kind of not necessarily handcuff you, but that's a hurdle that you have to kind of jump over and account for. So I think that certainly kind of comes into play as well. This feels to me like Luke Fickell either has his guy already or has a really good idea about who will be available and who he likes, right? So I don't know that obviously I don't think you ever go into these type of things just cold and completely, not knowing what you're doing. But I really get the feel that he knows what he wants to do here. And it might be one guy or it might be just two or three that he's really kind of focused on because he knows what it might look like in a couple weeks here. So the timing of that, I think, would indicate that I know who I want already, or I know two or three, and I'm ready to kind of move on that as well.
Well, let's talk about those potential candidates. You dropped your top 5 candidates either last night or early this morning. I don't quite remember which, but the name that is probably atop everyone's potential board here, just because of the relationship with Fickell, is Gino Guidugli. I can never pronounce his last name. Coach Gino. Coach Gino has long ties with Fickell at Cincinnati. He was the OC when they went to the college football playoff, developed Desmond Ridder, Alec Pierce, some of those other guys. And he right now is the quarterback's coach at Notre Dame. Came over to Wisconsin for a hot second to be the tight ends coach. Or I guess he just a tight ends coach on that team. He wasn't the play caller there.
Pass coordinator too, I think, is the title that he had as well.
Pass game coordinator. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So either way, one would imagine that he would probably be maybe the most logical choice. But there's a couple other names I think to keep an eye out on, John. So where do you see the search going?
Yeah, Gino Guidugli, I think I'm saying that right. I looked it up right before we got on here. Coach Gino, as we called him for 2 weeks when he was still on staff. Look, I think he makes a lot of sense, largely because Luke Fickell went and hired someone that he had not worked with in Phil Longo and took a big chance there, took a risk. Now, I don't know that he's going to get a third coordinator hire on the offensive side of the ball. So he has to get this one correct. And you would think that part of that thought process is, I want to know this guy. I want to know what it's like day in and day out. I want to know how he will respond to my feedback or the way I want to run an offense. So that familiarity piece certainly helps Guidugli. And if he's a guy that obviously Luke Fickell's looking at, I would imagine that he's certainly on that short list. They have that connection at Cincinnati. He was brought over not to run the offense, but brought over to coach the tight ends. And then he quickly jumped over to Notre Dame, which obviously the school he's still at, coaching quarterbacks. Known as a pretty strong recruiter. I think that's something that he certainly brings over, but not a name that necessarily moves the needle, right? I posted that board and fans weren't too happy with it, but look, these are names that make sense just a couple hours after the firing. And I think he's probably the first one that you have to look at in terms of past relationship, current position, the ability to do what Luke Fickell wants you to do. So he makes a lot of sense, but there's certainly some other candidates out there as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Brian Hartline as someone to look at. I think it's going to be a lot to get him out of Ohio State because he seems to be very happy there as a wide receivers coach, bringing in multiple 5-stars every year and working with tons of NFL talent. That would be a big transition for him coming to Wisconsin. He's also never been a play caller before. Some of the other guys on the article, I don't want to give all of it away. You need to be heading over to the website, but I think one other interesting name there for me is Marcus Arroyo. And he is right now at Arizona State, but did what was the head coach at UNLV for a little bit, where they didn't have necessarily a ton of success on the field in terms of wins and losses, but he's definitely a proven offensive mind and someone that would bring something different to Wisconsin again. At the same time, that relationship part, I think that you mentioned, is going to be really key. And I don't think there a lot of guys on that list that you dropped that have the relationships like Coach Gino. So I am I think right now he's the odds-on betting favorite, but I think there are other guys that may emerge over the next couple weeks if depending on how things shake out at certain other programs. So we will see what happens, and that's why you get like I said, man, I think it all goes back to that hiring day, because you also don't know who's going to be available. There might be some big names that become available, or that you hear, we've seen coaches who are head coaches. Look at a Chip Kelly who went to Ohio State to be the OC. Look at some other group of five or FCS coaches who are head coaches at those levels and going to the coordinator levels at the top Power 4 schools, because of obviously money being a big thing, but the opportunity to work with higher end guys. So I think that, I've heard people say, what is it? Jason Eck, who's up at North Dakota State, I believe right now, would be an interesting. Idaho. That's right. Mm-hmm. Idaho would be an interesting one as well. Otherwise, outside of the box, John, any other thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think another important thing to kind of work out here is like these agents. These aren't coach. This isn't Luke Fickell calling, Coach X. These are these agents that are working all year long, round the clock. And I think there are. Well, I shouldn't say think. I know that there are coaches who anticipate things happening in their career in just a couple of weeks, and I think a lot of people know what their future might be, even though if it isn't finalized yet. I think there's going to be a coordinator position that opens up in the Big Ten that might raise some eyebrows. Obviously not with Wisconsin, but in a couple of weeks you might hear of one that opens up that might raise some eyebrows. So
I think we're thinking of the same person.
So stuff opens up, right? And I think that everyone in that circle has a good kind of hand on the pulse of who could be available, what will be available. There's a agent to agent handshake agreement. I mean, there's just stuff going on. So, people talk about, oh, what about tampering? Luke isn't like going through his black book. I don't know if people still have black books of, oh, let me call Coach Gino and see if he wants to coach. It just doesn't work that way. So, like outside the box stuff, a lot of fans have brought up Sean Lewis, who's now at San Diego State.
He's only been there 1 year. Like, I don't see that. I don't see that being a realistic option. Also, he did the 1 year thing as an OC at Colorado. It did not go great for anyone involved there last year. Colorado's a lot better this year. That was not a cultural fit for him, obviously, as well. That's one thing. Obviously, Sean has a lot of Wisconsin ties, but just having talked to Sean a little bit, that man wants to be a head coach. Colorado was always going to be a 1 year stop to go somewhere else. And he was hoping it was going to be a Power 4 gig. Didn't work out. He still got San Diego State, which is, as far as group of 5 gigs go, pretty good, pretty solid. And guess what? Like, he might be from Illinois, but living in San Diego really ain't half bad. I don't know if he wants to come back to Wisconsin and just be a nomad at his 4th school in 4 years. That just, having talked to Sean, he's a family guy. Like, it just, that doesn't feel like, it feels like a non-starter to me.
Yeah, but and that one's interesting because, 2 years ago when we thought Jim Leonard was going to get the job, that was a name that came up of like, this is the guy Jimmy's going to bring over. And with the way that his career at that time went, he goes from Kent State to Colorado. That certainly would have made sense. So it's a what could have been type deal. But again, you talk about Matt, and this is an interesting thing, kind of a little bit of a tangent. But as you're going through this list, there's some head coaches that we took a look at. What does a guy prefer more, a head coaching job at like a MAC level school or a coordinator position at a Power 4 school? That's, because again, like we have some head coaches on there. What is their preference? Because the money is kind of similar.
Yeah.
And in some areas, the coordinator can offer a little bit more money. Joe Moorhead came up on the message board, and Wisconsin would be a significant increase in his salary if he wanted to be a coordinator. So it's should I jump down to be a coordinator in hopes of getting a better head coaching job? Should I stay where I am in hopes of getting a better, am I happy? Do I got kids? Like, do I want to move? There's just a lot of moving pieces to that, but that's an interesting one to like a head coaching job at a non-Power 4 level or a coordinator at Power 4 level. What's more beneficial at that point in your career? And that's obviously probably on a case-to-case basis with all these guys.
Absolutely case-to-case basis, because there are some guys who just love being a coordinator, love calling plays, don't necessarily want to be the CEO because you don't get your hands as dirty necessarily, right? Every day and in practice, working with the guys, scheming it up. Yeah, we have head coaches who are play callers. Look at a Lincoln Riley or something like that. But that's, not as common. I think it's becoming a little bit more common these days, but you still have, the vast majority of head coaches at Power 4 schools are not calling plays. So let's rewind 24 hours before the firing to the Oregon game, because that was a pretty excellent performance by the Wisconsin defense. And I think quelled maybe a little bit of the issues for some time with some of the talk around Mike Tressel. Does he have it? Will this ever work? Because they held a really, really strong Oregon team and a really great Oregon offense to 16 points. And we're in it until the end, until we saw the Braden Locke balls batted down at the line of scrimmage come to rear its ugly head once again. So I think the defense, at least coming out of this game, can feel pretty darn good about themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you told anyone on Friday night that Wisconsin would hold Oregon to 16 points, you would take that every day of the week. They were averaging in the high 30s. This is their lowest outcome all season. And look, as much as the coordinators have been criticized this year, and sometimes for good reason, others maybe not, but like the tip of the cap to Mike Tressel and what he dialed up. I'm sure Luke Fickell was a part of that, but for Wisconsin to be able to contain that speed and those athletes and a really good quarterback to, and hold them to 16 points, that's an incredible outcome. And it makes it hurt probably that much more for that group when that offense is just so inept. You talk about why does it happen now? Maybe Luke Fickell's like, my defense gave up 16 points and we lost to the number one team in the country. That's tough, and then you look at, Braden Locke, and he is so tied into Luke Fickell, and that family is so tight. I'm sorry, to Phil Longo.
Yeah.
And he seems to be getting worse every week. It's tough. And then some people bring up, he's a 20-year-old kid and that kind of stuff, but these guys are getting paid money and this is a big time job. And, there's a lot that goes into that. So you just wonder what even average quarterback play could have given you, so it's, that's a tough one. I think he, less than 100 yards passing, Wisconsin had like 230 yards of total offense. I think there was less than 4 yards per completion. Those are tough numbers to digest. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't good enough. And Luke Fickell makes that decision, and here we are talking about all the dominoes that now come from that decision.
Well, you mentioned the recruiting dominoes. There were a lot of prospects on campus this weekend. Obviously, we talked about Carter Smith probably being the most notable of them, but loads of 26s, some 27s in there. What has been the fallout from the recruiting weekend, both pre and post Longo news, from the guys that you've talked to who were there for the weekend?
Yeah, it was pounding guys out because there's 40 plus guys that you can talk to, and you can make an argument. And I thought about doing this, but I didn't know a way to really measure it. But this was, as I would say, since I've been doing this since a long time ago, probably the best collection of talent, or at least up there for the best collection of talent that Wisconsin's, ever got on campus. There are just, guy after guy after guy is a big time target for them in 2025 or 2026 or even to 2027. I mean, they got their commits on campus, and the overall feedback that I've been getting until it just you kind of had to shut things down. I didn't get much out because of the Phil Longo stuff. They just kind of took precedent. But you start at the quarterback position, and that is a really interesting group that they brought up. Carter Smith takes his official visit. You have Jaron Mock, currently committed in 26. You had Landon Locke, who was committed in 2025 for a very long time. You wonder what's going to happen with him. And they offered Peyton Falzone, a 4-star kid who's committed to Virginia Tech. So, I mean, just from that group, there are so many storylines to follow. Cairo Skanes took his official visit. He's in the 2025 class. A lot of big-time, receivers in the 2026 class with Tayshawn Bardo, who's an offered kid, Naeem Burrows, who's right now we have the number 44 ranked kid in the country for the 2026 class, Peyton Cook, Monsoon Sales. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on. And then, I think they did a really nice job, specifically with a guy like Evan Goodwin. I got a chance to connect with him. He just spoke glowingly about Coach Blas and the job he's done in his recruitment, going all the way back to Vanderbilt. He's a kid I feel like Wisconsin, well, he said it on record for sure that he's going to take an official visit there. A guy like Dalen Sharper is a kid who told me I'll for sure take an official visit there. So, again, I could probably talk about the group that's been there for a real, for the next 15 minutes or so, but it was an awfully impressive class that they got on there. And I will tease a little bit. Wisconsin, from what I was told, got some really good news on Sunday morning. I think probably hear about that this week. The lines kind of went cold last night. I don't think anyone wanted to talk about this things going on in the program, so I can't get official confirmation, but I've heard that there's some good news that fans might get later this week, and if it is the case, I mean, people are going to be really, really excited about it.
We'll see who that is. I don't know who that is, so I am very much excited to hear that as well. Let's end the show as we have the last couple weeks talking the Wisconsin high school football playoffs, and we had another upset, Muskego over Mukwonago. Heading to head to the final, and Bayport ended DC Everest's Cinderella run to the Final Four. John, what do you take away from this weekend, and what impressed you the most?
The biggest takeaway: don't count Muskego out, even if they come in barely squeaking into the playoffs. That team is, it seems to be healthy now. I think they got their running back that was a little nicked up during the year. And they have run through a gauntlet of really, really good teams. So, tip of the cap to Muskego and what they've been able to do. They'll go up against Bayport, who probably, like we've talked about, a lot of people, you and I included, thought Marquette would come up from that side. But, Bayport's been rolling too. That's been a very good program. So I believe that's a rematch of state title game a couple years ago, maybe during the Hunter War era there at Muskego. I should probably double check that, but that should be an awfully good matchup. And then you go down to Division III, Catholic Memorial versus Green Bay Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, two private schools there. Notre Dame's got James Flanagan, who's going to play for the Irish at the next level, a kid that Wisconsin wanted. So that's a nice matchup. And then, D2, Rice Lake versus Slinger. Slinger's 13-0 right now, really good football team. And they'll face a really good Rice Lake team. So, those are real fun games to get out and watch, those state title games at Camp Randall. The buzz in the city is really cool for those high school games. A lot of people up and down State Street. So that's just a fun weekend. I shouldn't say weekend, Thursday and Friday. Yeah. And I'm excited to watch some of those games.
I was going to say, you're going to be heading down for those?
Yeah. The WIA, they never let us in, but I'll be there watching some way, shape, or form. WIA, they just keep doing their job. I'll just leave it at that.
Prediction for Muskego versus Bayport.
I think it'd be tough to pick against Muskego right now.
They're rolling.
They're just rolling, right? And I watched that game on YouTube, Muskego, Mukwonago. I think Mukwonago is down their running back, so that's tough for them. But Muskego's rolling. That's a tough offense to prepare for. They'd probably be my pick right now. But look, Bayport's looking real good too. I mean, those are two teams that are playing their best football right now, and it certainly shows.
I picked Bayport after they beat Marquette last week, and I'm going to stick with it just for consistency's sake. So one of us is going to be right. when we talk about it next week here on Badger Blitz TV. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. Head on over to BadgerBlitz.com. Make sure you sign up for the best info and message boards anywhere in the Badger universe. Until next time, he's John McNamara. I'm Matt Perkins, and we'll see you in the den.